All right, this is Ronan Hart, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at 11 a.m. on Thursday, June 30th, 2022. I'm at the Chappie James Flight Academy next to the Chappie James Museum in Pensacola, Florida, and I'm talking to
Ross Pristera.
Could you spell that for the record?
Rosspristera.
All right, so to get started, do you think you could just tell me a little bit about where we are right now, what this building is, how you kind of came to be involved here, I guess?
Okay, so we're sitting in the current Flight Academy conference room, and their classroom is right behind me with all their flight simulators. And then the building right next door to us is the historic house where Chappie James grew up, and that's where the whole kind of story of this whole project starts, and where my involvement came in. And so 2001, I'll say, I'm the historic preservationist with University of West Florida Historic Trust. So I manage all the historic properties for the university, which they have downtown, and I do community work, and people approach me with projects and requests all the time. I had started in September of 2012, and I think within a month or two I met Ellis and Carlton came to my office and said there's this shotgun house that General Chappie James lived in. It's not being taken care of. We want to do something. Could you help us? And I was kind of intrigued by it, and I came up here and looked at it, and the city had tried to maintain the exterior, and looking around, we got inside. The inside was very rough. To where you couldn't step in certain spots, or you go through the floor. The paint was all coming off the walls, but it had a lot of the original character to it, but it had suffered a lot of neglect and some attempts to save it. So I was interested in the project. It was a good way for me to get experience out in the neighborhood, in the community, and work on a project like this from the ground up. So I gave them some pointers of what they can do and help, and a few months later they came back to me and they said, well, we think we have a plan now to start a museum. We want to do that. So what's the next steps? Because the city said they'll give us the building or lease it to us for $1 if we can have a plan to show what it could be used for. So I'm like, okay, well, I've never started a museum before, but I know people that.
I skipped a step. If you have your phone on, you could put it on airplane mode. Just interference sometimes. I should mention that earlier.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, I didn't have any experience, but I worked for a museum facility, so I knew professionals. We just had our chief curator retire, so she was looking for...
Chief curator for this museum or your
No, for our museum, Lynn Robertson. So she had been at that museum for 30 years and knew everything about museums. So I said, okay, if I can get Lynn on board, then she can help us with some of that stuff. And I talked to my boss, Rob Overton, who's currently the executive director of the Historic Trust. He was supportive of me being involved in this, gave us some tips on what they needed to do. So we started meeting, forming all the, getting all 501c3 paperwork in, getting the rules and regulations and how the museum would operate, all that paperwork stuff. Lynn loves that stuff. So she was really good at giving us all that. We started making connections with other museums that see what they would have, talking to exhibit designers, and then kind of coming up with a budget of what we would need to actually make this a reality. Through all that, the board got formed, and through my close ties, I just got assimilated into the board, and all of a sudden I'm working on this project and it's taking, it took more and more of my time and interest, but it was a good project. So, worked through that. So I think it was like a year or two, approached city council, worked with city staff. They ended up getting, so the neighborhood we're in, East Side neighborhood, has a special tax that you can use for projects within their neighborhood.
Okay.
So the initial money to get everything started came from that. They said, we want to support this. This is important to our neighborhood. We see the potential that it has. We really want to have a museum for people to understand that. We like the Flight Academy side. The Flight Academy had been an established nonprofit operating in Pensacola for years. So through them, the two groups agreed on being here, but we needed more space. So the city hired an architect, David Todd, who was very familiar with this project. I think he did one of the initial early restorations of the house, at least get the outside done. So he came in, we had community meetings, so we heard what they wanted. I believe the city had to purchase this piece of land that we're on right now for the Flight Academy. I worked with Eddie to try to make sure that whatever we were building did not take away from the historic character of the house, and that whatever we're doing with the historic house was fitting all the Secretary of Interior standards and following all those procedures. So it was like months of that. They got the funding, and then finally, maybe 2014 or 16, and it gets kind of blurry there. The ground was broken. Actually, wait, I know a date. It was 16. So, anyways, we had the construction process. I was helping with that, and the house needed a significant amount of work. Once we got into it and started, we took all the siding off because it wasn't original. Worked on the windows, the foundations need to all been redone. We saved what we could, which was like one interior wall, one ceiling. That's the Tuskegee room, the hallway. So we kept the original floor plan of the house and worked with as much as we could with it, but we still needed to be a functional museum. So through all that efforts, we got the space. The city then didn't have enough money for the museum exhibit part, but the group, the nonprofit museum group, had been raising some funds. We had some to work with. So I used what I had with my connections at work to get what you see over there, with the intention that down the road we'll get a more robust exhibit.
At work, not
here at my day job at the Historic Trust.
Okay.
Bringing
That's a lot of work.
other professionals, using our skilled talent there, my other connections in the community, to see what I can get out of those people to help with this project. Typically we don't do that, but this was such a good project for us to get involved with that I had full support of it. So we came up with the idea of you're coming in the back of the building. It's just a intro space about the family, and then you have the school. We want to recreate the schoolhouse, which is the building adjacent to the historic building. It's no longer there. You can see the steps, but Chappie, in his career, he always mentions his mom. It's very important. And then his mom ran a school, which was very important to the community. So you can't leave that out. You had to have that. There's still people here that went to that school that remember it. So we have the schoolroom, and then from there we transitioned into his college years, Tuskegee, and then in the front room it's his military career, how he raised through the ranks to be a 4-star general. So that's the basic way of going through it, and we got separated for an opening. It's been successful for a number of years, and then this past year I helped the Florida funded a African American Cultural Heritage Grant. So the first time ever that they've done this. So they had a grant program. You had to apply. They had well over 100 grants submissions. We last minute, I was going to apply for the museum anyways to do an exhibit there, but then I got asked by the city. They said, we've already submitted a grant for another project, so we can't submit one. Could you do one for the Flight Academy expansion and building improvements for here? I said, all right, I could do it. So in a week, Thanksgiving week, I put everything together, wrote a grant, which we're requesting $500,000 for it. And then in February, I believe, they did the grant reviews, and Eddie Todd, the architect who worked on the first part, he was back working on this expansion. We did the grant review process. The panel liked the project. I thought it was a good project to have, especially with the Flight Academy, the museum, and that Chappie's background. So then we had to wait till the state approved the budget, and we learned, I think it was last month, that we ended up getting the grant. So it's just under $500,000, and that'll expand the building for a classroom. So the space that we're in right now, this conference room, the Flight Academy classroom, will now become part of the museum. So we can have extra space for groups as they come in. Part of it is we've had trouble dealing with larger groups, like school groups. If they come, we need a space for 20 students or so, or bus tours, you need that. The museum also needs a nice meeting space. And then now we'll partner with the city and use some of their other funds to do a really robust exhibit in there. An exhibit designer that we work with a lot, at the Historic Trust work with a lot, he has an interest in Chappie James. He donated all his time and energy to do the Tuskegee room. So we're going to bring him on to do the rest of the museum for that. So hopefully in a year from now, it'll be done. We'll be sitting in the new museum space, but it's been, I guess, 10 years working on this and having it come to life has been pretty interesting. So that's the short.
That's amazing. Yeah, that was a very comprehensive.
That's my take on my involvement here.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to delve into anything else you need. But
yeah, I mean, I guess first of all, background. Are you from Pensacola?
I'm not. I'm from New York State, Utica, New York, so I went to UF for architecture school. Then went back up to New York for a historic preservation planning degree at Cornell, and then worked my way down back to Florida, because my wife and I wanted to be in Florida. And then 2012, I ended up getting this job here, first time in Pensacola. I liked it because I had felt authentic still, and like had older families that had been here from almost the start of Pensacola. It's kind of rare to find that. And then right off the bat, I got thrown into this project, and then I was in one on the west side of town, and it was just kind of fun to get these projects. So not here, but now I feel like this is my home. So for 10 years, it's.
I mean, I'm studying history right now, so anywhere where you get work immediately is pretty awesome. So I guess you weren't here very long before you started on this project, but did you ever get a sense for what the historical, like kind of existing, other than this place, historical memory for Chappie James is in Pensacola? You know, is he like very well known? Is he that history appreciated?
He's known since I didn't really know anything about him. But then as I got involved with this project and meeting people, I heard about it, but there was no place to go to even find stuff. There's I think a state building named after him, and some other things, but not a place to go to actually learn about him. So in the community, I think, he's kind of known, but not to I don't think people really, and we're a military town, which surprised me that you would not be promoting a 4-star general that came
Yeah,
from here.
right here. So you mentioned that the Flight Academy existed prior to the museum. Can you tell me much about that?
I don't know too much about their backstory, but I do know that it was a group of pilots had gotten together. They wanted to do something for their community here.
Mm-hmm.
So for underprivileged kids, they want to open up an opportunity for them to learn about other things. And they said, and I was talking to them last week about it, they said they didn't start it to necessarily get kids into flying. It was to expose them to all the other things that are associated with flying or technical skills and stuff like that. So they had been doing small classes in the summer throughout different places in town, and for a number of years doing that, and then they heard of this, and it was like perfect partnership. And I think last week they were here, and they had 15 or so students, and they had 2 classes, and it really makes an impact. And some of the events that we partnered together with, where they tell their stories of people who have gone through the program, it's really changed lives, and they come back, and it's really impactful. So it was great to be a partner with them. And so as they go through the program of the Flight Academy, they can also go through the museum and learn about Chappie James. So it's a good partnership there.
Yeah, so naturally it makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned talking about the neighborhood we're having a special tax to fund projects like such as this one. I'm curious what other projects, would something like this be typical for that kind of thing?
This is probably one of the bigger ones that they funded. So this would be years and years of that money building up in the account. But if they wanted to, whatever improvements they feel are necessary for their neighborhood, they have, I think, their own board. They talk to somebody at the city, and they come up with what they would want. And once they feel like they have enough support, then they can push it through to city council, get final approval on letting the money be spent. But this is one where they definitely wanted, and I think if the expansion would have happened, but they were going to spend more of their money. But the grant that I got, now they don't have to spend as much, or maybe not anything on it, which helps. The weird thing about the grant is you don't have to match the funds, which usually you have to match it. So this was a unusual thing for Florida to offer this kind of program that I hope they continue. but to be asked for $500,000 to fund these kind of projects was huge. So this will be a big part, and I think we're going to try to use some of their special tax funds for the museum expansion, since we've kind of handled the expansion part with the grant.
So in general, the community has been pretty supportive of this effort.
Yeah, and I think they really want to see more happen here, and they know to make that happen, they needed space, and exhibits need to be improved a little bit more. But so far, we got it open. They're seeing that the museum is a asset, so.
And that would extend kind of through city government, people through Pensacola, they've had to deal with.
Yeah.
That's very encouraging. Usually we come through on like different historical preservation stuff for African American history, and that's not the story a lot of the time. So it's encouraging to hear it kind of going pretty well here.
Yeah, I think we had the timing worked where all the people, I think, were in the right place, and we had Carlton and Ellis who just would not give up. At times I'm like, if you can do this, like, man, you guys are good. And then I was very eager and ambitious at the time, wanting to help. We all had good connections with people at the city, and just through a lot of dedication, we ended up getting it. But there was like no stopping it once they started selling the idea to people. But I had come here a number of times, many hot days, like going through the house and hearing their ideas, showing the two of them through our museums. We went to Mobile to look at museums there. They had gone to other places around the state and talked to people. So we really did our research, and yeah, I mean, we gave the community confidence that it was going to happen, and they saw how serious we were, and that's pretty important. I don't know what happened in the years prior to this. I'm surprised the house didn't get demolished. I think somebody donated it to the city, and then the city just did just enough to keep it up. But I mean, if this was lost, this would have been. It'd be a shame. At least now we have a center, and it's at the site where he grew up and where the school was. Otherwise, we'd have to rely on, like, where I work, our museum telling that story in our facility, but it's not going to stay up forever. Or it's at the Navy base, but right now you can't even get on the base.
Yeah, we wanted to when we were trying to, as an original plan, go to the museum.
So I think it's important. It's in the neighborhood. It does a lot to them, and especially people growing up here. So now they have something to look at, just like Chappie did. Like he had those impactful moments that stuck with him and drove him. Now at the same site where he got his start, hopefully the next generation will do that.
Yeah, that's excellent. So this might have been a detail that I missed. Are there any descendants of Chappie James who are involved in this project?
So we had contacted the family. We had tried to find out who's around, and we got in contact with a number of people. I'm trying to remember who exactly. The newspaper article out there, I think it's sister-in-law or somebody, or daughter-in-law. And then currently we have somebody on the board who's the granddaughter. Unfortunately, they said there was a house fire at one point that took a lot of the stuff away. They lost some of those things. Other things have been donated to other museums, which we're trying to reach out to get. But it's been cool to meet the family, hearing their stories. Even though some of them, like the granddaughter, she's like, I was very small when I met him, but he was this overpowering guy, but very sweet, to her. And she's like, you'd never know what his rank was or what he did, but family was important. And but yeah, we got to learn about him, and then even his son was a high-ranking general too. So it's did we have his son? Somebody, maybe it was his son. We had an event, and the other interviewers will probably tell you, but we did have a fundraising event, and I believe it was his son that came and gave such wonderful stories about him, and especially his story in Libya, the showdown with their leader there. Just the stories were incredible to hear from him. So yeah, we have been in contact with the family, and which has been good.
So it seems like the museum has kind of meant a lot to them.
So, and it helps the museum too, to say that kind of we have this support, we have those connections, and that they're still involved with us. So.
Okay. I feel like that covers all my questions I can think of for the museum. I'm kind of aside from the museum, I'm curious what other kind of work around Pensacola the Historical Trust has done here, because I haven't spent a lot of time here, pretty much just this trip. So I'm curious kind of what else there is.
So we manage for the state through the University of West Florida 30 properties downtown on 9 acres. So we are in the site of the original Spanish and British forts. So just about all the property we own is that spot. And in our facilities, we have Old City Hall, we have a city jail, both built in the turn of the century that are now the art museum, we have the history museum, we have a children's museum, we have a historic village with a train and caboose, we have multiple, so half of our buildings are museums. The other half are like leased buildings for different nonprofits and other businesses. And let's see, we've had close to 200,000 visitors a year. It's past few years have been a little weird, but actually this past year's been really good for us. So we have that aspect of us, and then we have over 40 acres in Santa Rosa County, the county next door to us. And there we have Arcadia Mill, which is one of the earliest industrial sites in Florida, where you can take a boardwalk and learn about the industries that were started there. So that, with that site. And then other things that we do, or that I do, is Pensacola 5 historic districts. So I'm involved with the city as an advisor to the Architecture Review Board. So I sit on the board and I get to review all the projects that happen in the historic districts, making sure that they're meeting the codes, and we're not destroying our historic architecture. I also review all demolition permits that are 50 years or older for buildings, and making sure we're not tearing down buildings that should be saved, or at least reviewing them, giving them another chance for review. And we work with a lot of other nonprofits. Ella Jordan House, which is on the west side of town. That project started at the same time as this project, so I got introduced to that. Diane knows more about that, but that was another African American project that Ella Jordan was a women's club for African American women, and very important to that neighborhood. The house got significantly damaged in Ivan, I think, and had a temporary tarp or roof on it for years. By the time I saw it, you could see the ground, you could see the sky when you're in it. It was horrible. So I had these two projects that I'm working on, both of them like horrible shape, but Chappie, this building was really good compared to that one. So one, we were talking about, well, should the house be demolished? And the community is just like, no, we don't want that. So again, Eddie Todd was the architect on that one. We worked with him. So I got to work with him on two projects right away, and we found a way to save as much as we could with that. And that one opened not too long ago, and now it has it's more of a community center. There's an exhibit in there, but interesting to work on these two projects that took 10 years to get open, and so it's been rewarding to do that. And we help other groups as we can. So they're coming to us for the assistance, and then my latest project's been a downtown history trail, so the American History Settlement Trail. If you walk around downtown, you'll see a red line painted on the streets. It's 3 miles, and you scan a QR code at 20 different stops, and you can read the information about the buildings that surround you and how the city developed. So that just got opened last month. So busy. lots of interesting projects.
That's encouraging. It's good to know that the city is doing that much for historical preservation.
Yeah. So I think we realize that we do have a uniqueness here of authentic history. We still have the buildings. It hasn't been overdeveloped. There's been a lot of development in the past few years, but it still has that charm that people like, and we have a great story. It just needs to be told better to the masses, and I think we're doing that now. So yeah, I mean, there's so many different things we can tell people, but every period of time we had something significant happen here, so it's just telling those stories and getting it out to people.
I'd say this place captures a pretty phenomenal story. That's pretty much all I wanted to ask about. Those are all pretty comprehensive answers. Are there any questions you wish I had asked, or any just kind of last notes to put into the archive here?
No, I think I covered it. I mean, I've just been just say, as you can probably tell, my role is more the technical side, getting it built. Even I love buildings and stuff. History is interesting, but then I started reading about Chappie, and it's like one of the first times I got really engaged with that aspect of it, to telling his story. So I've just been happy to be part of the project. It's been very rewarding, and got to meet some great people. So I'm glad you guys came.
Yeah, I'm glad we did too. It's yeah, definitely encouraging to get this many interviews out of this stuff. So, all right, thank you very much, Ross.
Thank you.